Here's your report.
Thanks, Jane. I wish I could hire a whole team of yous.
Try posting a job on LinkedIn. It's the world's largest professional network. Unlike resumes, LinkedIn gives a real-time view into a candidate's skills, experiences, and more.
Let's do it. You're irreplaceable, Jane, but another you would be great.
Find your perfect match with LinkedIn. Post your free job at linkedin.com/achieve. That's linkedin.com/achieve. Terms and conditions apply.
Are negative Google reviews hurting your business? Don't let unfair feedback cost you customers. At Webamax, we specialize in removing false, misleading, and damaging reviews so your online reputation stays strong. Our expert team works quickly and legally to clean up your digital presence, helping you rebuild trust. Visit us on the web at www.gowebamax.com. That's GOWEBIMAX.com, or text us for a free quote at 856-840-8343. Don't let bad reviews define you. Get immediate help from Webamax.
Every cup of Nespresso coffee is an invitation to transform your morning routine into a ritual you can treasure each and every day. Using the Virtuo Pop, a simple touch of the button freshly brews bold aromas and a rich, velvety crema layer for delicious cafe-quality coffee at home. Whether you enjoy your coffee hot or over ice, every sip, every morning is unforgettable. Nothing tastes like Nespresso coffee. Visit Nespresso.com or our app to explore our full range of easy-to-use machines and coffees not found anywhere else.
So good, so good, so good.
Get ready, because it's time to save at your Nordstrom Rack store. Now through February 23rd, take an extra 40% off red tag clearance boots, jackets, and sweaters. We're talking the best cold weather styles from Vince, Cole Haan, Sam Edelman, and more. All on sale for even less. All sales final. You never know what you'll find, but you know it's gonna be so good. Great brands, great prices. That's why you rack.
You know what's smart? Enjoying a fresh gourmet meal at home that you didn't have to cook. Meet Factor, your loophole in the laws of mealtime. Chef-crafted meals delivered with a tap, ready in just 2 minutes. You know what's even smarter? Treating yourself without cheating your goals. Factor is dietitian approved, chef prepared, and you plated. Pretty smart, huh? Refresh your routine and eat smart with Factor. Learn more at factormeals.com.
Hello and welcome to Islanders Anxiety from Lighthouse Hockey and the Fans First Sports Network. My name is Dan Saracini. Joining me on this Sunday evening by Zencaster is my friend Michael Leboff. And Mike, I have a confession to make to you and to all of our wonderful listeners. As much as I wanted to be a hater of the Four Nations face-off, I actually did end up watching the games on Saturday. I held out for the first two games, watched both games on Saturday, enjoyed Finland, Sweden, a little bit more than USA Canada. We'll get into it later, but it's actually been rather a cool thing, and I'm as surprised as anybody to find that I feel that way, because I really wanted to hate on it, but people are kind of enjoying it so far. I am assuming that you are still holding out on it, and if you are, I applaud you, because I am not as strong as you are.
No, you're assuming wrong. Actually, I definitely broke yesterday too. So I think we obviously have been making fun of this thing for a long time, and we were wrong to make fun of the actual competition. I think we were misguided in our assumptions that it wouldn't really have much juice to it. But the players are the ones who deserve the credit, right? The players are the ones that are going out there and like playing like it is like a sort of a playoff game, and they're certainly defending like it is a playoff game. So they deserve the credit. What I will say is what I've realized is that the competition has been great. It's been a lot better than I expected on the ice. But what ended up happening, which happens all the time in this sport especially, is the hockey media sphere overhypes everything. Whether it's a social media post from the Carolina Hurricanes after a win against the Anaheim Ducks on like a Thursday in February, like, oh, the greatest social media post ever, or the Amazon documentary, or did you hear that player's interview afterwards? Everything is always the greatest. You're not a real fan if you don't enjoy this. You're not a real fan if you're not rooting for Sidney Crosby. You're not a real fan if you didn't get a spine up, a tingle up your spine when you saw Mario Lemieux, who I hate. It's when you're sold all these things, and a lot of times, like the Winter Classic is a perfect example.
Yeah.
When these people carry water so hard for everything that the NHL and the sport of hockey puts on, when something comes and it actually is decent, you're like, well, why couldn't you just save all your hyperbolic bullets for this one, and we could all enjoy this together rather than you guys come off grading? So, yes, we're definitely, this is an honest podcast, and we wouldn't be an honest podcast if I didn't say that I watched it and I enjoyed the actual sport of hockey last night. But I still cannot take the extracurriculars coming from the guys up north, especially.
Yes, I totally hear you. And we may, in fact, have a little something special focused on that sort of stuff coming up in a couple of days. I know, and I totally know what you mean, because what got me to watch particularly Saturday night's game, and then I was just like, fine, I'll watch Saturday's afternoon's game as well, was a certain podcaster and insider saying that if you didn't watch that game, you have no soul. And in the words of the great Michael Jordan, I took that personally. And I was like, fine, you've goaded me into it, Frege. I'm going to watch the damn game. And I'm glad I did. But at the same time, I felt a little bit like, I was goaded into it. You know how when you feel a little guilty for feeling that way. We are not going to talk Four Nations this episode. That's probably the most you're going to get out of us. We might go back to the game later on if you're enjoying it. Great. There's still a couple of days left to go. Obviously, the final is on Thursday. But we are here to talk about the one Islander who is at the tournament and some other topics as well. And to do that, we have brought on one of our all-time favorites. You know him from The Athletic. You probably know him before that from Newsday. Hopefully you know him from someplace other than just this podcast, where he makes his annual appearance every year. And we thought it was the perfect time to bring on one of our favorites, our good friend, Arthur Staple. Art, how are you this evening? How are you enjoying the Four Nations face-off, I should say?
Well, since we're in confessional mode, I did not watch Finland-Sweden on Saturday, and I watched the first period of the U.S.-Canada game, and then I watched a movie with my wife, and then I caught whatever was left of USA-Canada at the end. So, like a true veteran sports writer that I am, whatever comments I make about it are kind of like half made up, because I didn't watch the whole thing. So, what are you going to do?
You saw the most important part of the.
I did. I saw the beginning, and as I posted on social media, I've seen this film before as someone who covers the Rangers and the Islanders.
Yeah. Right.
So while the rest of the hockey-loving world in North America was astonished by this, I was not surprised at all, especially since John Tortorella is behind the USA bench, that this all happened. So
yeah, I'm glad you tweeted that out. I'm glad you brought this up, because I do want to get to this. Like, I was watching the game, and again, the first period had all the fireworks and the fight and all that kind of stuff. The booing of the anthems, obviously, that nobody really wants to talk about why, but all that stuff happened in the first period. And then the second and third period were very much a defensive battle. Canada couldn't get anything going on. The neutral zone was completely clogged. Hellebuck was phenomenal, making all kinds of saves. There's guys laying out for blocks and stuff. And all I could think about the entire time was, people are talking about how great this game is. And if this was a hockey night in Canada, and it was Leafs Islanders or Habs Islanders or Canucks Islanders, and the Islanders played this exact same game and won that game 3-1, like, people would be crying from all corners of the galaxy that this team should be erased from existence. This is the worst thing we've ever seen. They're fighting. All they do is block shots and get in the neutral zone. What the hell is this team doing out here? And all I could think of was, that's my team. But, when they do it in this context, it's great. Right. So thank you. I don't really have a question, but thank you for commenting on that, because I thought the exact same thing. And for you, it was John Tortorella. He is behind the bench. For me, it was a Barry Trotz game. Same difference, right? I mean, those guys go back a long time. So I thought the same thing.
I would imagine that someone, if they were smart, and obviously he wasn't available after the game, but could ask Sidney Crosby, did it remind you of a certain 2019 first-round playoff series when a line of Leo Komarov,
right,
Val Filppula, and Anthony Beauvillier helped sweep your team?
Right.
Different levels of quality on both sides, but
Sure.
you know, whatever. Like, I'm watching the game, and yeah, Canada doesn't have Alex Pietrangelo. They don't have Shea Theodore. They didn't have Cale Makar. It was a big difference. John Cooper maybe was channeling a little Barry Trotz by putting out Anthony Cirelli every other shift, but you know, I'm not gonna. That part I did see and was a little bit of a head scratcher.
Right.
But not everybody's playing with their full capabilities, and the USA is the USA. They've got the Tortorella coaching tree is behind the bench with him and Mike Sullivan and David Quinn, and the US wins games differently than Canada does, and packing the slot and having really good goaltending and taking advantage of bad goaltending at the other end. It all added up to a game that a lot of people seem to say, as Mike was pointing out, was the greatest game of all time, and really it looked like any one of the 20 Rangers playoff games from 2012, many of the Islanders playoff games from 2019 to 2021.
Right.
Take your pick. If you're a local Islander or Ranger watcher, it looked very familiar.
Yes.
Yeah. And I understand that, like, the atmosphere was great and people were excited because people from outside of the hockey world were saying, "Oh, this is so much fun. The NBA All-Star game's going on, and we've already had 3 fights in 9 seconds, and in the NHL, like, hockey fans are so lucky that they did it right. They got rid of the All-Star game for this." And it was so funny to me that everyone outside of hockey thinks that this thing has replaced the All-Star game for good.
Just wait till next year before the Olympics.
Come to Long Island, baby. Of course,
right.
I was joking with you guys. Like, it's just so funny that gonna be the most despised All-Star game of Mark Gatcomb might get the biggest ovation at the 2026 All-Star game on Long Island, because nobody's gonna go to that thing. It's so appropriate that they get it. And as you said, like, you could tell how jacked up everyone was that they thought, like, hockey was the center of the sporting universe, and that's what made them think this game was anything special besides, you know, an exciting game with high stakes. It was well played, whatever. It was a good game of hockey, but you see a good game of hockey a lot. And I also was wondering, I don't know if Mario Lemieux is in the building for this one. I'm assuming he was. He was there for the first one. That's the guy who, when the Islanders had that fight night, called it a garage league game and like wrote a letter to the league. But it's okay if it's the Kachuk brothers and JT Miller throwing down, then it's the greatest thing the sport's ever seen. It's not a criminal act. And so it's been a lot to take, but when I've been able to separate the stuff that is grading from the actual hockey, like I have enjoyed watching the hockey part of it. So they did get that part right. It's just unfortunate that the people who are covering it are making it seem like something a lot bigger than it actually is. So, we said we weren't going to talk any more Four Nations, but we just did another 6 minutes on it. So.
I was going to say we lied, but now we can
we keep lying. We keep lying.
No, that's okay. I think we've said our piece, and like I said, we might have something cooking to take to task those who are making this first ever Four Nations face-off seem like it's been around since 1932. But and we'll definitely have plenty to say about the All-Star game when it comes to Long Island next year. But we do need to talk about one guy who was at the Four Nations face-off, and the guy who I know I'm watching the entire game. I'm not really paying attention to anybody else. I didn't know that Cirelli and them played late in that game as much as they did, because I was looking for 29 on Team USA, because that's Brock Nelson. And again, my personal feelings are, as long as Nelson gets out of this tournament healthy, that's all that really matters. But the reason is because he's a popular guy. He was asked a lot of questions about his UFA status. People are wondering if he's going to get traded, if he's going to re-sign. He talked with a few people. We talked about this on the last episode of Anxiety, where he said he loves Lou, loves being on the island, but he wants to do what's right for his family. All that kind of stuff that you're supposed to say when you're a free agent, not I can't wait to stay here. I want to win here. I want to make this place my home, that we've heard before from other UFAs to be on the Islanders. You wrote an article last week about Nelson and the whole thing. This is obviously before the face-off had started and before he, had his other media availabilities. And you mentioned that you thought that everybody should read the article if you haven't already. It came out on the 6th. And what you're thinking is that although Lou Lamoriello will take his time probably right up to the March 7th trade deadline, you feel that Nelson is most likely going to get traded, that he's, maybe looking for something that, he's not looking to sign an extension with the Islanders, might want to win, get to the Cup playoffs this year, play closer to home, and whatever reasoning is in his head. After him talking to other media members playing in this tournament now, apparently Lou Lamoriello and his agent met at the Four Nations face-off. Do you still feel this way? Do you still feel that it's most likely that Nelson gets traded sometime on or before this year's trade deadline?
Yeah, I do. I don't think I've heard anything that changes my mind. What little I know from hearing people around the league and things like that hasn't changed a lot in the last few weeks. I understand some, people have reported that Lou is going to make a push. I don't think that's, the deadline is coming up. So I guess there's an end point to it, but I don't think that's any different than what's been happening all season long, that the conversations that he's having with other general managers that are asking about his players, and obviously Brock Nelson is the first guy that people are asking about.
Right.
The conversation has always been, I'm trying to sign him. I'm not trying to trade him. And the conversation with Ben Hankinson, who's Nelson's agent, I think has been along the same lines. And I don't think they've really progressed too far. And I think it really is a matter of, does Brock Nelson want to stay here? And I think right now the answer is no. I think the answer has been no throughout most of the season. And I think the closer you get to being a free agent for the first time in your career, given all that's gone on, all the last couple of years on the island, even though he's been a good player and an important player, and he could end up, if he does extend, he could end up being the all-time leader in games played as an Islander. He could end up being top, 5, I guess, in terms of some of the statistics. I think the temptation to see what's out there, I've covered this team long enough to have had some of these conversations with guys like Franz Nielsen and John Tavares and Calapozo and Mark Streit, and guys who were at different stages, even Matt Martin, about, and I think the one common factor is the closer you get to it, however you get there, whether it's you get a low ball offer from the Islanders, or you have someone in your ear saying, why don't you think about this? Or your family talking to them and saying, what if I tried this? And what if we, uprooted and went somewhere else? The closer you get to it being a reality, the more interesting it gets, because and I think for Nelson in particular, he knows how wanted he is. I'm sure that,
right.
There's no tampering conversations going on, but he knows what Bill Guerin's about, naming him to this team. He's earned a spot on this team. And I think if you watch the first couple of games, he's played a role really well as one of the, 20 best American forwards at the moment. He's a versatile player. There'd be a lot of people interested in him as a rental for the rest of the season. There'd be a lot of people interested in him on July 1 as to be their number 2 center. So I think once that gets in your head, it doesn't seem so scary. There's plenty of guys who take that knowledge and go the other way. I think a guy like Josh Bailey always hit that, kind of got to that precipice and then was like, nope, this is where I want to be. And, guys are different, but I think in this particular case, Nelson has an agent with a lot of different clients and a veteran guy who knows how to handle situations and is maybe, as agents do say in these moments, maybe you want to see what's out there. Maybe you want to be a little bit more patient. And I think, Brock's a pretty honest guy. I think some of his comments there were relatively candid and saying, yeah, you got to he's not going to be deceitful and say, I'm definitely doing this or I'm definitely doing that. And I think that scenario kind of lends itself to that, he's got an opportunity. It's only going to be probably one more of these for him. So, I just, all the signs to me point one way, and Lou could come in and give him 8 years and $7.5 million and a full no move for the whole life of it. Right. And all of a sudden, suddenly your priorities change. But failing that, I don't see him signing before March 7th. And to me, if that's the case, and he ends up not being traded, then I don't know what Scott Malkin is doing, continuing to employ Lou Lamoriello, because that's just dereliction of duty to me. So that's where I'm at.
So the Islanders come back from the break in a little less than a week now. It feels like forever, but it's a tough schedule. It's not they just went through a gauntlet, but they've got a pretty tough schedule with Dallas, then like the Rangers and the Bruins. So two huge games on the other side of that Dallas game to weigh in on this playoff race. I guess the question is this: like, if let's say the Islanders do well in those games, and Lou holds on to Nelson, or what would you say? Would your calculus change on whether or not he gets changed? And then the opposite too, like if they do come out and struggle, the distance between them and the wild card lengthens. Do you think that it's almost like a no doubter, or as we've been saying all along, like this is the guy who didn't sell off anybody during the Murphy's Law season a couple of years ago. So, like, I wonder if people just aren't reading the room correctly with Lou in that regard. But do you think that if they are like well and truly in this thing at the end of the first week back and the trade deadline looms, is it going to be a situation where Lou's just like, I'm not trading him no matter what, even if he does walk? And or do you still think he'd be thinking, oh no, we could still sell and make a playoff push?
I mean, you have to look at it from a pretty overarching view here. I understand that in the short term they could win a few games and put themselves closer to it. Matthew Barzal is essentially done for the regular season. If he comes back, it'll be a week or two at most. We've heard that Lou's saying that Noah Dobson will be skating presumably when they're back on the ice this week. Again, Ryan Pulock skating. He's made these promises before. I believe last month he was talking about Semyon Varlamov would be skating when they got back from their kind of their Vegas, Utah trip. And I guess he was skating somewhere in secret, and now he's just gone forever. I don't know, who even knows. So I think you have to sort of see where they're at with those two guys, because the cracks were starting to show in 3 of the last 4 before the break in terms of the ridiculous off the street guys that they had there on defense who were having a nice little run during the 7-game winning streak, but can't really sustain that. And I just don't think that they're a team right now, health-wise and structure-wise, that can really be a threat. Even if they win every game between now and March 7th, I think it all comes down to, at least with Nelson, does he want to stay? Yeah. And if he says, yes, I do, and then you sign a contract right then, you make the deal. If he says, no, I don't, I want to see what's out there, or I want to see how we do after the deadline, you have to move him. And I understand where Lou's head is at, that is selling guys off, especially core guys like that, is very much not his style. But Lou has a boss, as much as we kind of sort of make it out to be that Lou is his own boss, even though he does talk to Scott Malkin a lot and reports directly to him. There is a guy who signs his checks and signs off on his decisions, especially when they involve money. And that guy can tell him what to do. I think I covered 2 teams, and I don't want to talk about the other team that much, but we look at the Rangers, and when we see what they're doing, which is a lot of changes in the middle of a season, and they've kind of put themselves in the same relative area standings wise as the Islanders. Everyone knows that what Chris Drury does is either endorsed by or pushed by what James Dolan wants, because James Dolan is very much the owner and everybody knows it. I don't understand why Scott Malkin wouldn't. I understand different personalities and they run their organizations differently. And the way Lou operates, it feels like he says, okay, just, I'll do what I'm going to do and I'll let you know what I'm doing. And it's not really the case. So I think this is, and I've written it, and I think a lot of people have said it. This is the time when Scott Malkin can say, this is what we're doing, or I'm going to have to make a change. And so I don't see how, other than wanting to negotiate to keep Brock Nelson, I don't see how anything else could be just Lou's decision without Scott Malkin saying, we have to have a direction here. And if the direction is we're 1 point up, or we're 1 point out, or we're 10 points out, or even 6 points up, I think it's very obvious how banged up this team has been, how they're going to have to run Ilya Sorokin into the ground again, even though he was playing very well for the last month or so. And we know how poorly that's gone the last couple seasons. I just think there's too much that we know from past seasons and from what's gone on this season to be able to say, yeah, Lou, you do what you do, make a targeted pickup, trade for Trent Frederick, maybe that'll help. It doesn't make any sense to me on any practical level. And even the world of hockey is not a practical place sometimes, even on the impractical level, because Lou, for all of his faults as a GM, he very much understands math because he was a math teacher many years ago, and it's a big pursuit of his, to have good data and analytics and things like that. And he can be a realist. He knows the teams that he's put together. He knows what's happened the last 3 years. He knows what's happened this year. They made their big move 2 years ago to trade for Bo Horvat. They made their big move last year to bring in Patrick Roy. And I don't know how many of those you have left in the chamber to asset wise and just convincing your boss that this is the right thing to do to just get in the playoffs and win a game or two. It seems very obvious to some of us and to a lot of people in hockey. None of those people work for the Islanders, but I'd really be surprised if this was we're just going to keep doing what we've been doing next couple of weeks, regardless of what happens on the ice.
And if Lou is interested in math, then he surely can count how many other teams are vying for the same playoff spot that the Islanders are. The Islanders aren't even in, right? They're 4 points out, and they've still got to fight with 5 or 6 other teams. Basically everybody but Buffalo is kind of alive for that one spot. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is that they've had the same amount of points through 53 games for the last 3 seasons, which you pointed out and Mike pointed out, and even the Islanders pointed out on their broadcast, which is an insane coincidence. Like, it's not even a coincidence, obviously isn't the right word, but that's an insane thing to come about. And Mike and I joke on the show all the time about how it feels like it's game 210 or whatever it is of the 21-22 season, because they've all blended in together. So there's a reason for that, is that they've kind of felt that way because they have the same amount of points through the same 50 amount of games in the last 3 seasons, which is kind of nuts. But this one number struck out to me, as you mentioned, that Nelson is climbing the charts of Islanders games played. He's got 895 right now. He's 5 behind Bob Nystrom for 4th place. If he plays the 6th game, obviously he'll be 4th behind Josh Bailey, his former teammate. There are 6 games between when the Islanders get back from the Four Nations face-off break and the trade deadline. In fact, the 6th one is on March 4th. So Nelson could play that 6th game, become the 4th, the number 4 in the Islanders all-time game played list, and then get traded 2 days later on March 7th on the trade deadline, or the next day on March 5th. Like, that would be a bit of a whirlwind couple of days where it's like, wow, that's great for Brock Nelson. This is amazing. By the way, also, in terms of playoff games played, the first player, if you look down a list of Islanders playoff games played, the first player who comes up that's not a dynasty player is not Brock Nelson. It is, in fact, Matt Martin with 82 playoff games played.
Wow.
And Nelson is right behind him with 80, as is Casey Cizikas. So I'm just saying, there's a lot of considerations here. You've articulated them beautifully here and in the piece as well. And it's just, I don't envy Lou from this standpoint, because I'm with you. And we've been saying this for weeks now. Logically, the play is to trade Nelson. There's no way around this. You trade a guy who a lot of teams want. You can get a lot of picks and prospects and whatnot back. It only makes the most amount of sense. Could they sign him and he can be a solution for the future? Sure, but not if it's, I know you're joking, but not if it's like an 8-year, $7 million thing. If it's like 3 years or 2 years, that's fine. But from what it sounds like you're hearing, that might not be the kind of deal that he's into. It would be a short-term thing. And so there's a lot kind of going on here. And this is not like the last 3 seasons, that they've, like you said, they made those big moves and they're still kind of in the same spot, fighting for that last playoff spot. So it feels like the more I think about it, the more it makes sense that Nelson has moved. But then again, it's Lou Lamoriello. We never know. Nelson could be here. He could wake up on March 8th, a New York Islander, and then we have to watch him, walk away or something on July 1st, which would probably suck even more.
It's also funny to have an 82-year-old as your direct report at work, right? Like Scott, if I was in Lou Lamoriello's shoes and I was 82, and I kind of see the writing on the wall that there's a good chance that this is it for me as the Islanders GM and probably NHL GM, and my boss was like, you better trade that guy. I'd be like, nah. What are you gonna do? Fire me? Okay, do it. Go right ahead. I'm an 82-year-old dude. That's the worst you could do. I'm already I won a bunch of Stanley Cups. I solved the Cold War. I've done enough. I don't need to stick around here. So I in my own fan fiction brain, I like to think that that's what's going on. Lou is just dodging his calls and stuff like that. And I do also want to point out something that Art glossed over or said in passing that I find very, very important to point out, that Lou Lamoriello was a math teacher, and he does believe in data. And isn't this hockey dinosaur that's
caveman?
Yeah, right. That's just another thing to keep in mind when everybody makes fun of the Islanders for not trading Brock Nelson and cashing in on his asset being appreciated at this time by 8.2%.
There's also the factor that he could have an extension done already, and no.
That would also
score number 3 in the
right.
Lou Lamoriello trade deadline.
Yes.
Let's make a deal possibility. But
right.
Probably not, but you just got to throw it out there.
Yeah. No, that would be something too, is if, Brock is like, well, that's the I love Lou part of the conversation, and then I got to do right best for my family. And then I was like, yeah, that's signing an extension. So I don't know. It sucks. It's weird. Again, Brock, please survive this tournament so that we're not adding yet another layer of unpredictability on this whole thing. But yeah, I mean, again, it's we've never been on these sort of no, you can't trade Brock type of thing. We get it. If he gets traded, we get it. It's going to suck, but we do get it. And this is different. We talked about this on our mailbag over at the Patreon. This is different than the Tavares situation. You mentioned Nielsen before. It's different from the Oposo, Nielsen, really, frankly, Martin situations back then when Garth Snow, barely made an offer to those guys. This is something that, is kind of almost new territory. It's unknown territory a little bit, but it comes down to Brock, whether or not he wants to stay. And frankly, if he wants to leave, he really has no, I don't think there'll be any ill will. I don't think there'll be any sort of unfinished business. The guy's played over 900 games for this team and done everything they've asked him to do, and stepped up in a way post Tavares that nobody really expected. And so I don't think there would be a lot of that for the crowd that assumes that that Islanders fans always hate people that leave. No, we just hate the one guy. Everybody else seems to get a round of applause when they come back in one way or another. So I think Nelson would definitely be that way. Another guy who comes up, and this is in the same article you mentioned Barzal before. I did find it funny. I don't know how you made it through the article by writing Barzal kneecap, because when I think of kneecap, the first person I think of is Kevin Poulin, who we talked about. I didn't even know kneecaps could get hurt before his got hurt. So He's my sort of go-to Islanders kneecap injury. But like you said, he's going to be out a while. Like this is not something that you come back from quickly, right? Like he's probably not coming back anytime soon.
No, and I think there's still being optimistic that this could be a 6-week thing, but I've heard initially I heard 6 weeks, then once you have surgery, I think when you hear the word surgery and kneecap, you're not thinking like, oh, he's just going to be right back on the ice. I think this is a leg stability issue.
Yeah.
So, I think it's one of those things just talking to people when you throw it out there about people who know other players over the years that have had a similar issue or something that they've heard that was similar. It takes a long time to not just feel right, but feel confident that in your leg. He doesn't have the Kevin Poulin trick kneecap that seemed to dislocate every few weeks, which I feel bad about. And it was nice to see Kevin Poulin back playing in that alumni game at the Garden. But so that's not this, but I don't think it's a quick turnaround, and I don't see why you would want one of your most important players, maybe your most important non-goalie, to rush back in a season that who knows where it's going. So it's not great, and I think it has to be a factor in what they do the next couple of weeks. You're not waiting in the wings for this guy to get, like when he was hurt earlier in the year, and you just say, let's just get through it. This is the second long-term injury for him. You've got Ryan Pulock on a long-term injury. You had Adam Pelech out 20 games. Anthony Duclair hasn't looked right since he came back, and he missed whatever it was, 25 games. So, sometimes Semyon Varlamov, who knows where he is, Marcus Hogberg. It's just, the list is so long now that you're kind of like, maybe this, these are just sort of some flashing signs for us to say, you know what, I think this is not going to be our year, even if we manage to get in. To think that they were in a better position either of the last 2 years, at this time, closer to the playoffs or in the playoffs, when they made their coaching change, or when they made the Horvat trade, that they were actually better record-wise than they are right now, points percentage-wise, is kind of one of those like, oh God, they just had a 7-game winning streak, and they're not really any closer to a playoff spot than they were at game 20. So again, I hate to keep coming back to it and being such a downer, but it just feels like this. Make the decisions they're going to make, and if Brock Nelson wants to stay and they want him to stay, you can see your way to saying like, all right, this is a guy who's not going to decline. He's gotten better as he's gotten older, into his 30s. He's a guy who plays in a lot of situations. You could make yourself believe that this is going to be a good thing to have him for the rest of his career, to be an Islander for his entire NHL career. But I think as far as the rest of it goes, where you say, like, instead of assessing what we've got and seeing what we can sell, that instead of saying like, we're keeping everybody and we're signing everybody because you never know what's going to happen, we'll get healthy eventually. Like, all right, that's a little too much, I think, to believe.
Yeah.
we spoke I don't know what episode it was, but recently, about how one of the things that's kind of not been talked about here is, what do you actually think Brock Nelson signs for next year? Like, if the Islanders came to him and said, like, realistically, like, here's like an appropriate offer, like an enticing, tempting offer, like, what does that look like? And then the flip side is, I mean, I'm always skeptical of these trades. I think that the fans and pundits kind of just always go to the same formula, which is a prospect and a young NHL ready player, because that's what the TSN Trade Center insiders have told us since 2002. That's what every player is worth. But so what do you think the contract that Brock Nelson signs his next contract? What do you think, no matter who it is, what do you think that contract looks like? And B, the Islanders trade Brock Nelson. What does the return actually look like? considering where he is on everyone's wish list, etc.
The contract, I would say, if he's, cap going up, I think it depends on which team, yada yada, things like that. I could see 5 years, maybe seven and a quarter per.
Wow.
I would have said something in the sixes again, which is he signed for $6 million per his last deal, which was more of a prime age player, but he's a better player than he was when he signed the last time, and he still plays a role that, outside of, you want to talk about whether it's Leon Draisaitl or somebody like this is still one of the 3 or 4 best number 2 centers in the league, and he kills penalties now, which he didn't do 6 years ago. He scores 30 goals a year every year, which he didn't do 6 years ago. I just think there's a lot more to his game now, and he's hitting the jackpot at the right time. The cap is going up by 20 million in the next 3 years. So where teams would have been like, we can only afford to give you 5 times 6, or maybe you do 6 times whatever to give him the extra year to spread it out more. Now, he's not going to be the guy that's making 6 where every other number 2 center is making 7 or 8, depending on their age. So I think he's a $7 million a year player, based on his numbers and based on the minutes he plays. So I think there's that. And I think if you're setting yourself up to think it's going to be more than a first round pick that's going to be in the 20s at the best, and probably in the late 20s or even in the 30s at most, more realistically. And prospects, if you could get somebody's youngish RFA bound player that they don't really want, not always somebody that's ideal, but I think that's probably the best you're looking at. I think the situation you want to be in, where you are with the Islanders, is to have 2 guys or 3 guys like that you can move. I think what you want is, if you trade Brock Nelson, you also commit to trading Kyle Palmieri. If it's for a second and a fourth, you say, okay, that's enough for us. We're just getting rid of these guys. You say, we'll eat half of JG Pageau's remaining contract so we can get 2 seconds for him. And then all of a sudden you've got 2 firsts and 4 seconds to work with. And then when you're retooling and you're thinking about who you're going to sign, and now you've got some cap space, then you say, all right, we'll package 2 of these picks or 3 of these picks to get a good young number 2 center, or a guy who's maybe not quite there yet that we think we can get there. Or you say, we'll trade 2 of those picks and a decent prospect for Dylan Cousins. And then you've got a cost-controlled guy who could be your number 2 center, playing for a terrible team, but is locked up for however many years, which suddenly, before it seemed ridiculous to have a guy like that with his track record locked up for so long. And now teams are going to be salivating because you're going to have so much cap space to work with. You want that cost certainty. So that's how you want to turn it around quickly. And I think the Islanders are in a situation where they can turn it around quickly. They still have a very good goalie. They still have, relatively speaking, a decent defense, although that can be a whole other conversation about trying to trade at least one of those guys.
Right. We'll get to that in a minute.
and they have some guys coming up that might pop in the next couple of years to be middle 6-4, to become a younger focused team, and not a team that's built around, I think it's a shock to learn that Matthew Barzal is going to be 28 in a couple of months. He's an old man now by NHL standards, and they need to have more guys like Simon Holmstrom and more guys of that ilk. And they have almost none of them in their lineup. And that's how you turn it around quickly. You don't automatically become the Ducks or the Sharks when you decide to get younger. If you're not a great team, you can be the Capitals, but you have to be really aggressive and really committed to making those changes. The Caps were committed to making those changes. Again, I don't want to keep referring to them. The Rangers are going about it in a very unorthodox way that's pissing a lot of people off, but they are making those changes, whether some of the guys in the team want them to happen or not.
Right.
You have to commit. The kind of halting steps, and I feel like, well, okay. The counter argument from the Islanders would be Lou Lamoriello is not making those steps. He is committed to the group that they have, which feels like a whole other conversation. But I think if you're understanding that in these next couple weeks, and I'm not, before when I was saying like Lou's telling people, hey, I'm not trading this guy, don't talk to me. He's having conversations. He talks to lots of people. Every GM does that. They're not totally unprepared for what's to come. So he knows what the market is for Palmieri. He knows what he could do with Pajot. Maybe he even knows if there's a market, if it's not before March 7th, maybe that's revisited in the summer for a Pelech or Pollock or even Mayfield, fingers crossed. He knows that he's going to buy out Pierre Engvall when the season is over, when the window opens. But if you don't do any of those things, what difference does it make?
Yeah.
So I feel like there's a pretty clear path, if things go well, to stockpile some assets. Don't necessarily say we're going to draft 6 guys in the first couple rounds and call it a day and wait 4 years to see if one or two of them show up. But you can use those assets to get back in it really quickly and look different in doing so. And I think that should be the priority for the Islanders, is to think about it as a quick turnaround between selling off now and figuring it out in the summer, and also a way to start to change how the team looks, because that has been a long time coming.
Yeah. Again, everything you're saying makes perfect sense. I guess my only stumbling block is I'm not really enthusiastic about Cousins or Casey Middlestat, who is the other guy who gets kind of like roped into a lot of these Nelson trade discussions. So I guess I'm going to have to familiarize myself with Rasmus Kupari, who was a center for the Winnipeg Jets, who I could see. I've heard, he was in the Pierre-Luc Dubois trade when they sent him to the Kings. So it's like, oh yeah, they can get a second-round pick or a first-round pick from Winnipeg and Kupari. Okay, so the 31st overall pick and a guy who's topped out at 12 goals 3 years ago. Gee, thanks. Sign me up for all that. So I don't know. It's again, it's rough. It's a weird thing, but if I were them and like that scenario played out and they got mainly picks back for Nelson, Palmieri, and whoever, I would like them to package those picks and their own pick for a higher pick. Maybe to take, I don't know, certain forward at Boston College that, from what I understand, grew up an Islanders fan. You know what? Let me save that for the second half of the show. We'll get into that in a little bit. I do want to talk about, you mentioned the defense a second ago. You also talk about Noah Dobson in your article. And again, it's so funny. You call it being a downer. I call it being a realist in an age where these are very, very hard to find. So I appreciate what you're doing in this articles like this, because really, as much as it's fun to get wrapped up in, no, they could trade Dobson for Elias Pettersson or whoever. Not a lot of it makes a ton of sense. First of all, he's hurt. Second of all, he's young. Third of all, there's just no reason why, like, logically they would trade this guy. Elliot Friedman's been on a whole thing about like, well, if they had a specific talk with another team, maybe something like that. So basically, like, they were talking to somebody else about a big trade that probably would have involved Dobson. That's a different story, as opposed to like, we got to get rid of this guy. He stinks. Not a lot of it makes a lot of sense. And so and he's an RFA coming up at the end of the year. So again, a situation that is going to be difficult. And, in all fairness to Lou, it's going to be hard to gauge what to give Dobson, considering he was a 70-point player last year and he's like a 20-point player this year. He's hurt again now. He hasn't looked right since the MetLife game. So I'll just echo Mike's question before, like, what kind of contract, assuming that they just re-sign Dobson, which is most likely the scenario, like, what kind of contract do you think he's looking at here? And, where do they kind of go from here? Because it really hasn't been a good year and a half or so for Noah. And I mean, he's really drawn the ire of the fan base, unfortunately. And people are using him as the number one trade chip, whereas it really just doesn't make a ton of sense.
No, and I mean, if you could get a lot for him, but again, all the things that he's displayed so far this year, other people have seen and would not say like, "Oh yeah, you can have
Right.
our number one. You can have our number one center for this guy." Also, Vancouver has Noah Dobson, but way better in
Right.
Quinn Hughes, and I'm not sure how many of those guys. I tend to think there's a lot of teams around the league that are sort of, we went through a phase of Hughes or Dobson, who's a bigger guy but not very physical. Adam Fox, Cale Makar. Cale Makar is kind of in a category by himself, just the way that he plays. But these like smaller, offense-minded guys who weren't expected to be physical on their own end. And I think if you want to double back to Four Nations, and you see the cream of the crop of both of these countries, and even some of the other two countries that are in it. Small defensemen are kind of out again.
Right.
I don't think that the analytics revolution on defensemen that provide offense and don't push people out of the way in their own end, if it ever was a thing, is really not a thing anymore. Yeah. So I don't see why the Canucks, just to put this one to bed, would want to trade one of their forwards to get a not as good Quinn Hughes to put on the second pair and then pay him $8 million a year or whatever Dobson would be asking for to go with Quinn Hughes, who may or may not want to stick around and may want to go play with his brothers after his contract's up in a few years because the Canucks suddenly traded everybody good. Having said that, I don't think they would trade him. And I don't know that makes any sense. He's 25 years old. He did have a 70-point season last year, even if it wasn't a great season defensively. The Islanders have had quite literally one other guy ever to have 70 points as a defenseman. And obviously it was Dennis Potvin, and he did it a million times. So that's dumb to me. Like it's one of those things like, like Lou's not dumb. I understand that if it's part of a conversation and you're exploring some things, and that might be a way to get it done for a big time player, that's the way Lou operates. But their defense is old, and Dobson being injured kind of maybe puts a little bit of makes this sound a little silly, but like it's an old defense. They all get hurt, the old guys. As I sit here, only Adam Pelech is healthy right now, and that's a miracle that he's the one of the three longtime guys who's actually been the healthiest this year, and he missed 20 games. So, where do people think they're going to get another guy to replace Dobson?
Right.
That like Scott Prunovich is going to suddenly be their 26-minute a night guy. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Right.
So, but as far as the next contract goes, they're in it. The cap going up puts you in a bit of a bind, because you could say, all right, well, we want to see a little bit more from Noah Dobson, so we'll say 3 years. So we'll buy 2 UFA years and we'll pay him $8 million a year for 3 years, which sounds like a lot because it's twice as much as he's making now. But really, for a guy who's essentially their number one defenseman, it's not crazy. And then you say in 3 years, we'll revisit it. Well, in 3 years, if he has 3 straight 70-point seasons, he's going to say, now you got to pay me $15 million.
Right.
You could have paid me 9.5 or 10 for 6 years, but you guys decided you wanted to go short term and see what I could do. Well, here's what I could do, and now F you, pay me. So you do run a risk, and I think when you have a player who's an RFA, who's an important player, let's say, I think that the trend is going to be, because of the way the cap is working and because of the way agents operate, is going to be to try to go as long as you can go to get that cost certainty,
right? Even
if it costs you a little extra money. So yeah, I think when we were talking coming off of last season, like this guy could make $10 million a year. Like he still could, depending on how long this contract is.
Wow.
If it's 6 or 7 years, it's going to be 8 figures. And that I do not want to be anywhere near the internet the day that they announce that contract. Right. I may never go back on the internet if they sign him to that contract.
Good time to sign off. Yeah.
But that's the reality now, that a guy who plays that many minutes, even if it's not as effective as he once was, You're paying for future benefits there. You're paying so that you don't have to pay twice as much in a couple of years because you wanted to wait and see. So I think they could get him for on this contract for 5 years, maybe $9 million, maybe for like Adam Fox type money. And he's not Adam Fox, and he's not Quinn Hughes, and he's certainly not Cale Makar. But if he is a 50 to 60 point guy who can play 25 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes when the rest of their older guys are hurt and they're not terrible, yeah, that's probably what you're going to get. And if that makes people tear their hair out, then show me where you can get another one of those guys, because they're not that many of them.
That's true.
Yeah. And this is all I don't think we spoke about how there was earth-shattering news around Noah Dobson that he changed agents this week, which also for some reason set everybody ablaze, as if that's not something that does happen, and it doesn't mean one thing or another. But it was fun to watch the internet try to figure out, oh, is this his way of saying he doesn't want to be an Islander anymore?
Yeah.
Has he been reading all the tweets about how he plays defense like he's holding his cell phone on the ice? Is this my fault that Noah Dobson is leaving the Islanders because when in reality that's just something that happens. I think some defensemen on the Jets changed agents last month, and I didn't see much scuttlebutt about that.
Everyone knows that whatever you do is in pursuit of leaving the Islanders. That's
exactly.
The standard NHL view.
Right.
What thing I think is so funny, you brought up how it maybe just doesn't make much logical sense to trade this guy. Something that I don't think has been picked up on by a lot of folks, especially off the island, is if you look at the blue line next year, those quote unquote old guys that you referred to, Pulock, Pelech, and Mayfield. They're the only guys with contracts for next year. Romanov is an RFA.
Right. Oh yeah.
Lubomir Perunovic is an RFA. Tony D is a UFA. The long tooth Dennis Cholowski, UFA. Adam Boquist, RFA. Obviously Dobson. So it's just like
wow.
They're gonna need bodies on the back end, and I'm assuming that I think Perunovic right now seems like someone who'd probably stick around, maybe like on the Mike Riley deal, get him like a 1-year deal at 1.25 grades out to in the new cap.
Riley, by the way, does have another year, but he's got to get his stuff right first.
No, he's done after. He's done after this year.
Oh, I thought it was a 2-year deal.
No.
He's not on.
Wow.
It's literally only Pulock, Pelech, and Mayfield for next year. Obviously, 4 of the guys are RFA, so you expect them back, and then there's Isaiah George, etc. But so I when I was like thinking about all the Dobson stuff, I went to Puckpedia and I saw that. I was like, nobody is picking up that the Islanders don't have anybody signed next year besides these 3 dudes. And I think that one of Lou Lamoriello's goals for next year would be to trade one of them. And it would likely, I guess Pelech would be the most likely just because he's got the modified no trade clause compared to the other guys. But the Islanders, like, they are in like a people, if Nelson and Palmieri go, you'd assume that Matt Martin doesn't come back, and they've got a lot of chances to give themselves even more of a facelift again. So it's not going to be the same kind of feel to the team next year, and that's especially true if Dobson goes. And that's what everyone's expecting now that he's got a new agent. He hates it here and he wants out.
He's doing it because he wants to get something done. Okay, what
you
is
think?
That? Right?
Yeah. Oh God, man, no. He actually changed agents because he likes this. He likes the sitting back and not knowing what's to come next. He doesn't. It's not to get something done. Okay, thank you.
Exactly. It's funny that, I mean, if you're thinking he'll make $9 million or $8 million, that's, like you said, we were talking about 10 or 11 not long ago. So to me, $9 million almost feels like, wow, actually, you know what? I'd probably take that.
You know what? Also, I meant to ask too, is there's all this talk about how certain teams have a quote unquote internal cap You can't make more than Nathan McKinnon, and you can't make more than Sasha Barkov on our team, whatever. The Islanders' highest paid player is Matt Barzal. Do you think that whether it's Lamoriello or whoever the next GM is would care if they have to pay Noah Dobson more than Matt Barzal?
No, I mean, it's different positions too. And you've got a number one defenseman versus a number one center, or number one right wing or whatever. No, and I do wonder about the internal cap part though. I mean, I think we're certainly not back in the Charles Wong days, but the Islanders don't make money. They're not a profitable team right now, from what I understand. So,
but they've got the village. They got the retail village.
They do. The cap keeps going up though,
and that's how they launder all their money through the retail village. Right. The Hermes shop pays for Bo Horvat's salary.
So yeah, I do wonder what that's going to look like, and there will be more than a few teams, I would think, that aren't going to be, up near the upper end of the cap, like almost everybody has been the last few years. So that's going to shake out and make things look a little different. And I wonder, I think if Lou Lamoriello is in charge, they will spend a lot, and if he's not, then I think the mandate might become a little bit different. And there's ways around it. The problem, like we said, is Dobson needs a contract. Romanov needs a contract. That's your top pair. The most tradable guy you have back there is Pelech, and it's if he can stay healthy, he's and he's been really good the last month, I would say. And then you get rid of him, and you've got you keep Pulock and Mayfield, who are guys that you probably prefer to trade, but probably can't for a variety of reasons. So they've got to have a better plan in place. I would assume Isaiah George is part of that sooner rather than later. Maybe Perunovic is a part of it, but the kind of the big three who don't eat up a ton of cap space in the new cap world, Mayfield and Pulock and Pelech, I think combined are 15 million, which used to be a bargain, but if they play a combined, if they each miss a quarter of every season, doesn't really help you. So, I'm curious to see, and really beyond Isaiah George, there ain't a lot coming on defense. They've got the big Finnish kid Pulkkinen that they drafted last year. They've got Callie Odelius, who lost a whole year of development last season, has been okay in his first pro season in in North America this year. There's a reason they're signing guys off the street when everybody's hurt. So I'd be curious to see how that all unfolds this summer.
Yeah, as would I be. But that's actually a perfect segue. We're going to take a break right now. When we come back on the other side, we're going to ask Art about some of the team's prospects that are coming up, both in-house and I guess wishful on the wish list to be in the house, at least for me anyway. We'll come back and we'll talk about that stuff and see what else we got. All right, thanks a lot. Come meet us on the other side. Thanks. And now a word from our sponsors. First is always VintageIceHockey.com, where you can get t-shirts, hoodies, jerseys, and more featuring over 100 classic hockey logos. Vintage Ice Hockey now carries a full line of Islanders Anxiety merch featuring our blue and orange brain logo, as well as our Al Arbor and the Island shirts. And as always, our portion of the sales go directly to the Center for Dementia Research. That is VintageIceHockey.com. Try wines from the Pinot Project. They offer a Rosé, a Pinot Grigio, and a Pinot Noir that was named a Top 100 Best Buy by Wine Enthusiast magazine. All are delicious, priced at less than $15 a bottle, and available at local wine shops and at UBS Arena. Learn more at thepinotproject.com. Please drink responsibly.
Hey, Fidelity. How can I remember to invest every month?
With the Fidelity app, you can choose a schedule and set up recurring investments in stocks and ETFs.
Oh, that sounds easier than I thought.
You got this.
Yeah, I do. Now, where did I put my keys?
You will find them where you left them.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
Look around. You can find cars like these on AutoTrader, like that car riding your tail. Or if you're tailgating right now, all those cars doubling as kitchens and living rooms are on AutoTrader too. Are you working out and listening to this ad at the same time? Well, multitasking pro, cars like the ones in the gym parking lot are for sale on AutoTrader. New cars, used cars, electric cars, maybe even flying cars. Okay, no flying cars, but as soon as they get invented, they'll be on AutoTrader. Just you wait. AutoTrader.
Okay, reminder, by the way, that we are on Patreon at patreon.com/IslandersAnxiety. Membership gets you ad-free episodes, bonus content, written posts, and a whole lot more. We got a Country Club Atmosphere episode coming up this week, subject to TBD. We haven't talked about it. We'll figure something out. So sign up today. We also have a brand new episode of Weird Islanders, the podcast, coming out this week for everybody. So check that out and sign up whenever you can at patreon.com/IslandersAnxiety. Okay. There was another article you put out that I highly recommend everybody read, and it's about Boston College forward James Hagens, who is projected to be top 2, maybe top 5 pick in this year's draft. And by now, everybody knows this dude is an Islanders fan, and a very vocal one at that, which is pretty rare amongst top draft eligible players in recent era. I was shocked to find that the highest drafted Long Islander ever was Mike Komisarek, who drafted 7th by the Canadiens in 2001. Oh my God, they took him 7th? Wow. I mean, he was an okay player, but holy Christ. Anyway, this is a great article. You got to meet James Hagens' family, talk with them about their Islanders roots. What was that experience like? You got to go back up to your old stomping grounds in Boston, so that must have been fun too. But how did the article come together, and what'd you learn about James and his family?
We have really good draft writers at our place, Scott Wheeler, Corey Pronman, and Scott Wheeler in particular has done a lot of features on some of these guys and had mentioned that, I knew that James Hagens was from Long Island. I knew that some of the people that I know through the Islanders, Garth Snow in particular, who's pretty involved in youth hockey on the island now, Aaron Asham, who coaches with Garth Snow. These guys had coached against James Hagens and said, this kid, throughout the last couple of years, it said, like, this kid's a stud. You got to keep your eyes out. He's going to be great. And then you start reading about him, and these, as the draft year, the 25 draft year was starting to come around, that this kid's the real deal. And, starting to look up who was a big prospect. I mean, I think you'd say either Charlie McAvoy or Adam Fox, probably the best player right now from Long Island, but it's easy to forget that Adam Fox was not considered that big a prospect when he was drafted. He was drafted in the 3rd round. And McAvoy, who was drafted, I think it was 14th overall by the Bruins, looked pretty good knocking Connor McDavid on his ass the other night in that game. And, playing like a guy you'd imagine is from Long Island. And has been really good for the Bruins for many years, and is a top level player.
And is Mike Sullivan's son-in-law? I was like,
Mike
what
Sullivan's
the fuck?
son-in-law.
I was like, when did that
Boston
happen?
University, my alma mater, very very hockey centric place, and Mike Sullivan is a BU grad. He was in a lot of communications classes with my brother. There was a few years ahead of me. And Mike Sullivan's daughter went to BU when Charlie McAvoy was there, and
that's insane.
Here we are. Now they now they have a kid too.
My mind was blown.
So yeah, I mean, Scott LaChance, one of the great Islander draft picks out of Boston University, is Jack Parker, the legendary BU coach's son-in-law. So,
oh wow,
it's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. It's a very big little city up there in Boston. Let's put it that way. So James Hagens, plays at the U.S. development program, goes to BC, maybe thought he'd be the number 1 pick. There seems to be Michael Schaefer, who's a defenseman in the OHL, maybe overtaken him in the rankings, but who knows? So it is interesting. I didn't know a lot of the details about James Hagens' dad, Mike, who grew up in Hauppauge. They played, the boys, James and his brother Michael, played at Superior Ice Rink out there in Kings Park. They played for the Long Island Royals. I think James and his brother, well, not his brother, because they never really played together, different age groups, obviously, but Mike Hagens helped coach the Royals. He played a little bit in college, and one of his coaches when James was younger was Eric Bolton, who had just retired as an Islander player and is now an Islander scout. Eric has a couple of sons who came up through youth hockey on the island, and I think that was the part of it that was interesting to hear about, that obviously this family grew up Islander fans. Mike, dad, was telling me he goes back to the Sean Bates penalty shot and took the boys to Nassau Coliseum, which is a rite of passage, even in talking to Adam Fox about his fandom. Adam was a Ranger fan because his dad was a Ranger fan, but he said, I loved going to the Coliseum. It was cheap and easy to get there. And you just, he's like, I love watching NHL hockey. So even if the Rangers weren't playing, there I am up on the glass watching NHL players, and it was easy to do. And I think that is kind of a nice underrated part of being a kid who loves hockey, who plays hockey on the island, that, within the last 10 years of the Coliseum, because the team wasn't very good and the building wasn't very nice, you could get there pretty cheap and easy. So I think that, that's the Mike Leboff plan too, about how you become a big Islander fan. So it works for everybody.
Sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think with the Hagenses too, what reinforces it is having Eric Bolton, the former NHL player who played for the Islanders, having Benoit Hogue help coach when James, had moved on to the U.S. program, coming back in the summers and working with his old team. He's helping coach Marty Reisner's son, and Marty Reisner's out there, working on face-offs with him after the youth practice is over. So I think the added attraction of Long Island as a place where a lot of families settle, a lot of hockey players finish their careers there and say, this is a pretty great place to raise a family, so I'm going to stay here. And youth hockey is pretty wide open, I think, even now. There's obviously been more players over the years than you go back to, whether it's Komisarek or Eric Nystrom, Chris Higgins, also a Canadiens draft pick from back in the day. And you move on up to more modern times, McAvoy, Fox, Sonny Milano, more recently, that's right, Matt Coronado in more recent years. So I think it's become a bigger hockey hotbed, but not crazy place filled with prospects. But a lot of the guys, a lot of youth players will come into contact with former Islanders as coaches or as coaching opponents' teams, and I think that means something. It meant something to the Hagenses, which is great that these guys put in their time, and I think you see a lot of hockey coaches and hockey dads now that played in the league and wherever they decided to settle, and it's growing in a good way and continuing to grow. And I think if you go to Northwell Ice Rink, the Islanders are pretty well segregated because that's the way Lou Lamoriello wants it, but you will possibly see Cal Clutterbuck or Casey Zizekas or Josh Bailey or Garth Snow, because they're there with their kids, teaching them how to play hockey and teaching some other kids how to play hockey. And that's crazy. To me, that's a great byproduct of having the Islanders there for so long.
Definitely. And like Hagens, in reading the article, and again, I urge everybody to go out, seek it out and check it out. He might be the first of the sort of Tavares era kids to be drafted into the NHL. Like, we forget that team did have a lot of highlights and great moments that drew a lot of fans back in after, 2 generations of being like, yeah, I'm not into these guys, And so, like you said, it went from the Bates penalty shot to, 2013. It was 2002 to 2013. There was an 11-year gap there where nobody really gave that much attention to the Islanders. And now we're starting to see people from that last group show up. And it was interesting. And yeah, it's just funny how, here we have an entire other podcast literally designed to talk about guys like Marty Reisner, Eric Bolton, these other guys. And these are the dudes who are kind of bringing up this next generation of Long Island born hockey players. So it's really nice. And, as I was saying before, my dreams, I talked about a dream scenario before on another episode of Anxiety where I think it was the mailbag, where I was like, maybe the Islanders swing a deal with the Nashville Predators, who are pretty bad this year, get a pretty high pick, use it to take James Hagens. Maybe they can do a similar thing with getting a bunch of picks for Brock Nelson or Kyle Palmieri, do the same thing. The likelihood of James Hagens becoming an Islander in this year's draft is very, very, very small. But from the article, you could tell his parents, yeah, they kind of want it. And another guy who wants it is Cole Eiserman. We're going to get to him in a few minutes too. And they kind of ribs him a lot. You open up the article with that, which is great. But it would be awesome if this guy was an Islander. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be in the cards. But just thinking about it just really makes me feel good. Like, I would just really love to see this dude play for the Islanders, although it's probably not going to happen. But I like the fact that he's like so vocal about it. So like if he does get drafted by some other team, he could be like, no, I'm an Islanders fan. I grew up an Islanders fan. And I wanted to be, you know, as we've been hearing about people fucking growing up being Leafs fans for a million years, you know? So I just love to hear that.
It opens up a lot of fun for us, because you can think about, oh man, this guy gets drafted and he picks, oh, why are you wearing number 34? And he's like, oh, Dublowitz and the poke check, man. Like, I remember watching that. You know, he could be maybe he listens to Weird Islanders. You don't know. Maybe he's, you know, you never know. He could be the first Islanders draft pick to be a fan of Islanders anxiety. Or
James,
Weird
please
Islanders.
Reach out to us. We want to talk to you.
Yeah, James. We know the Adam Fox playbook pretty well here on Islanders anxiety, because we gripe about it all the time.
Yeah.
So we can sit down with you and your family. In my James Hagens research over the past few months, I've learned that the town motto of Hauppauge, where he's from, is the land of the sweet water. So that's really nice. On to Eiserman though. So we've seen him at the World Juniors. We saw the goal against. Were you in the building for the Beanpot with that goal, or is that?
No, I went up a little bit earlier.
Yeah, so we saw that. Was like I guess Matt Barzal has a little bit of it. I'm trying to think of the last Islander that has the can't believe I'm saying it, but like that X Factor kind of ability that this guy has, and the kiss the shield, taunt the opposing fans. I mean, is it fucking Trevor Gillies? Like, I can't think of the last Islander who has this kind of competitive fire that like it does actually like come out of him. Like we see Brock Nelson is like sly about it. Leo Komarov obviously like was a little bit of a gnat on other team side, but like I can't remember the last guy. I mean, and because Casey Zika said that, like, you know, the Diet Islander guy, like those guys, but this is a different level, and I honestly can't think of the last guy who had it like this. Not just I'm gonna be the hardest working guy on the ice, like the guy that we drafted before, Victor Hedman, but the actual, like, I'm gonna give the Ranger fans like the double middles if I score a huge goal and stuff like that. Like, I can't think of someone who the Islanders have had in this vein, and I don't know.
Yeah, he's you know, his celebrations, I feel like I had to kind of do a little, you know, the lip reading that went on at the World Juniors when he scored the power play goal against Canada, and then delivered a verbal beatdown to Easton Cowan, the Leafs pick, who had taken the penalty.
Oh yeah, that was great.
The attaboy cowboy should go down in the lexicon for a long, long time. But yeah, like this, you know, this kid, he could have. I think it was you, Mike, that joked to me, like, this kid could have turned pro and played that exact role that he played at the World Juniors as basically a power play specialist and 13th forward. If he could have done that for the Islanders to give them a 14% or 15% power play instead of 9%, yeah. I don't know if we're talking about trading Brock Nelson right now.
Right.
So, you know, he's you know, I guess the knock is, you could say he's a bit one dimensional, but I think watching him play and reading a little bit more about him, you know, I think people knock his skating. I don't think it's that bad compared to some other people. Like, I think he's a better skater than Oliver Wahlstrom was in his pre-draft year and post-draft year. You know, he's a little guy, but he's definitely kind of solidly built and doesn't shy away from mixing it up. And you know, he did say that he does watch Sidney Crosby, and who doesn't? But really, when he talked about Ovechkin, obviously this is Ovechkin's the greatest goal scorer in the history of the NHL, or will be in a few months. Whenever the Islanders are on the schedule, that's
exactly.
Ovechkin will set the record. But that makes a lot of sense to see the way that Eiserman reacts to scoring goals, the way that he tries to score goals by just firing pucks. And, you know, he's got a good shot, but he is a volume shooter, and you don't see that too much in the NHL anymore. You don't see 300, 350 shot guys. And So yeah, I think he's got an element to his game and his personality that the Islanders could use. I think when when we see the Islanders play, it's a team you want to root for, but they're not jamming it into people's faces. They're just very quietly confident. I think that's a reflection of who their captain has been for the last 7 years, and who their coach was 7 years ago, and who their general manager has been for the last 7 years. That they're not gonna step out of line. They're not gonna be obnoxious about being an underdog. They're just gonna be relentless, and that has worked to a point. And now maybe it's time for a little bit more FU than in some of their younger guys. And I think he's still a little bit of ways away. I can't imagine that you're going to see him in an Islander uniform before his age 20 season, or maybe even beyond that. He's also a young, he didn't turn 18 until the end of August, so he's kind of in a Simon Holmstrom cycle of being one of the younger guys in his age, in his draft class and cohort group. So he's going to be a prominent guy at the World Juniors next year. And I'm curious to see where it goes from here for him, whether he kind of takes a good trajectory up in his second year and becomes more of a leader on that BU team. And BC may lose a lot of their guys. Maybe they become the dominant team in the Northeast, and he's the one that's kind of the cause of it, or what he can add to his game in the next couple of years, and maybe turning this giant cruise ship around for the Islanders will coincide with him getting ready to turn pro and being more of a complete player.
Yeah, I'm worried about that trajectory too, because it's cool to see him have a good year at BU. It'll be cool to see him at the World Junior and be like, oh, that hopefully, who's the Caps guy who is like the superstar now, who was at World Junior?
Ryan Leonard. He's the Boston College. Yeah.
Right. So like, he's kind of the man of the moment. It'd be cool if Eiserman had that as well. But, it's always, we know that progress is not linear, particularly when it comes to these guys. We were talking before we came on about, I was looking at the Bridgeport Islanders stats and wondering what the hell happened to Matt Maggio and William Dufour. It's not been a great scene down there. If Eiserman does go pro, he's most likely going to spend some time in Bridgeport unless he hits the Islanders running, and then it's a different story, and he becomes, a very rare kind of story for the Islanders, especially. Then it would definitely mean that Lou Lamoriello was not in charge anymore if that happens. But you were saying you have a story coming up about some other prospects as well, and sort of what's going on with them. I guess this is a good time to do that. So who's going to be spotlighted in this article, and kind of what did you learn about them? Because this is a thing where, first of all, I should mention, you mentioned Scott Wheeler before. I'm surprised he's still standing and talking when he finds out that James Hagens is from Long Island. I just figured that would have like blown his mind to the point where he couldn't do his job anymore and he'd have to quit and join a Tibetan monastery or something. But there's, they do need some help in the prospect pool area. That's not a secret. You don't need to be a Scott Wheeler to figure that out. So like, what have you learned about the prospects that you were able to talk to for this upcoming article you have?
Well, I mean, the U.S. has had back-to-back golds at the World Juniors, and this year, one of their standout players, not Ryan Leonard, who was the MVP, but Danny Nelson was the Islanders' second-round pick in 2023 out of Notre Dame. Had a really good tournament. Was centering one of the top two lines. Was wearing a letter. It was he was part of the back-to-back gold crew. And I think he kind of maybe jumped up a little bit in some people's eyes. I think he was projecting more as a number 3 center, maybe more of a bottom 6 guy. And I think he's shown, at least at that tournament and maybe through his sophomore year at Notre Dame, that he could be a little bit more than that. He shares a name and a kind of a build with Brock Nelson. So maybe there's a little bit of wishful thinking that he can just step in, maybe wear number 29. Just don't even have to change anything. I don't know if we're going to go that far, but I think he's a guy who's maybe the closest to turning pro. He's kind of got a decision to make, and him and Quinn Finley, who was a third rounder in 2022, both of those guys also August birthdays, maybe a little bit. When you're drafting a guy who's not yet 18, I think maybe they get compared a little bit unfavorably to some of the guys that are a little bit older and a little bit more mature physically and have maybe played a little bit more. So I think that's kind of a Lou and his amateur scouting crew, something that they're trying to exploit, I guess. Some of those late birthday guys who maybe need a little bit more time to develop. But Finley, who's at Wisconsin, Nelson's at Notre Dame. Finley's got 19 goals this year, point a game guy. I think for both of them, Finley's a left wing, Nelson's a center. It'll be interesting to see because both those teams are quite bad this year. I think that they're bottom two in the Big Ten. Notre Dame's having a shockingly bad year. I think they're 11-20 this year, so there's going to be no postseason for them unless there's a miracle run. Same with Wisconsin. So I'd be curious to see what these two guys decide for themselves and what the Islanders decide, whether it's worth having them both go back for another college season or turning pro. And, you've outlined Bridgeport's terrible. Their developmental track record is not great. But is it that bad? I mean, Simon Holmstrom, I think, is a pretty good example of a guy who was drafted, came straight over as an 18-year-old. I think he was the youngest player in the pro ranks in North America at the time. And he played 100+ games in the AHL before he came up and played an NHL game, and he is a legitimate NHLer for them right now. He's as prized a possession as they have, as any of their other star players, because he's one of the only under 25 guys they have who's worth anything. So I think they need more of that. And whether you get that by bringing players into the AHL to let them get acclimated and play big minutes, and when you have a empty prospect pool and a terrible AHL team, the one saving grace is that the guys that you bring in that are important to you can play as much and in as many different situations as you need them to, because there's no real path for them to play in the NHL, and there's nobody blocking their way at the AHL level. So that's one consideration. The other consideration, as you pointed out, is that when Lou Lamoriello runs a team, the AHL team doesn't really have a huge priority or a strong developmental record. They trade away a lot of picks, and they get a lot of their hits in terms of draft picks end up moving through the ranks quickly. So I'd be curious to see what's decided for Nelson and for Quinn Finley. And the other guy that I spotlighted is Eiserman's teammate, Kamil Bednarik, who's a center, who's also taken last year in the draft and is also at Boston University and has been teammates with Eiserman for about 3 years and is essentially his polar opposite on the ice and off the ice. A very quiet kid, very thoughtful kid on the ice, where Cole Eiserman wants to be Alex Ovechkin, Kamil Bednarik wants to be Patrice Bergeron. He is a two-way guy. He is a penalty killer. He's a face-off taker. He is the guy that was out against Hagens in the BU-BC games that I saw, trying to shut down BC's top high-powered guys. And Jay Pandolfo, former Weird Islander, who is the BU coach. I think Lou probably sees a little bit of Jay Pandolfo in drafting Kamil Bednarik, a guy who was also a second-round pick for the Devils, was part of their Stanley Cup teams, was never a flashy guy in any way, but kind of a glue guy. And as Pandolfo said to me when I was up there, like, Kamil Bednarik is a guy you have on teams that win championships because he's responsible. He's a teenager who would prefer to stop someone from scoring a goal than scoring a goal. And, he's not going to be in the NHL anytime soon, and maybe not even ever, but he's building an interesting little resume already as a college freshman, being a shutdown guy, being a penalty kill guy. And I'm sure he'll get his chance at the World Juniors next year to do some of those same things and maybe get more of an opportunity as he progresses through at BU. But Lou he's always been a guy who's looking for college prospects. He did it with the Devils all those years, whether it was Pandolfo, Brian Ralston, Billy Guerin, Zach Parise, Travis Zajac. They certainly are able to scout the American players, and especially the guys that are headed to college or are already in college, to find guys. And it's been interesting to see, really, that you mentioned Matthew Maggio, you mentioned William Dufour. The Canadian junior leagues have, outside of Isaiah George Noah Dobson, who was really kind of a can't miss guy. They're not really finding a lot of their, any of their promising guys there. They're really looking to Europe. They're looking to the U.S. college ranks, and maybe that's just those are the trends that are happening everywhere. But whether it was Holmstrom, whether it's Jesse Pulkkinen, who they're really high on, the big defenseman that they took in the second round this past year, or any of these guys that I mentioned, they're not totally bereft. It's still not one of the higher ranked prospect pools, but there are some guys to keep an eye on, and maybe that will be some solace in these next couple weeks when maybe players that people really like start leaving here in trades.
When Patrick Roy was named coach, we all kind of assumed that there would be like this big French Canadian invasion, but might end up being like an NCAA invasion. Like, I'll take it. If as long as they're good, I'll take it. But yeah, a lot of these guys are sort of tantalizing, and wow, I didn't know that about Notre Dame and Wisconsin. That's unfortunate. So basically, no matter who's good, well, I guess Eiserman's BU team is good, but basically, no matter where you are in the Islander system, the team you're playing for is pretty lousy. Like, it's just, it's really not, there's not a lot of success happening on a team level in the Islanders prospect pool, no matter how, but there are good players out there. It's just, got to get them up here.
Yeah. It's, I think Bridgeport is maybe an extreme case this year because they've been so bad. And they're really not, there's maybe 3 or 4 guys that have any promise in terms of the NHL there. You're keeping an eye on guys like Alex Jeffries and Callie Odelius, who mentioned, Jakub Skarek, who managed to make his NHL debut, but it's been a long time coming, and I don't know if he's ever going to really be a legitimate NHL goaltender. But so it's an extreme case this year, but I would think that if there's a change with Lou and you're bringing in a new general manager, that's going to be a pretty high priority to make sure that their developmental program is better than it's been and stocked with more options. They're all lottery tickets. You got to get as many of them as you can to try to hit on a few, and they really, they put a lot of stock in a few guys, and you need to have more of them.
All right, for my kind of last bit here, we've kind of touched on everything head to toe in the organization, but the coach. Do you think that knowing that the situation above Patrick Roy with Lou Lamoriello and what his future looks like, what if you had to handicap it, like what percentage would you say Patrick Roy coaches the New York Islanders on opening night 2020 of game, I guess would be what, game 308 of the 2021-2022 season next year?
I would say 70%.
Okay.
I mean, I say this knowing roughly what his contract situation is. I think he got a very short deal when he signed on last year, and he's been extended since then. I do know that. So I don't know if they make a change above him, whether there would be the stomach to also get rid of him and be paying him for a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is. And even if it's still Lou in charge and they change some of the personnel around, I would think you'd want to see what Patrick Roy could do, different players with younger players. I think we've seen some hints, not of friction between Roy and Lamoriello, but just friction at Roy having players that aren't available because they're hurt, or having players that can only play a certain style because he's tried it a different way and it hasn't really worked that well. So I think you may want to see what he can do. And even if it's a new general manager, I don't know that ownership would want to be paying as many people as they'd be paying to not work here. So yeah, I'd say it's over 50%, but I can never be too certain that that if there's a new GM, they wouldn't want to bring in their own guy.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, especially again considering that there's at least some uncertainty with who was going to be in charge. Art, we can't thank you enough. This has really been great. Like Mike said, we've run down the almost entire organization tonight. And we can't thank you enough for spending some of your Sunday with us. You could literally be doing anything with this team, with both the teams you cover not playing. You could literally be doing anything, but you're spending your Sunday night with us. So we cannot thank you enough. And we always thank you. We always love when you come on the show. I am going to ask you one more question. And it gets back to, I meant to ask you this in the first half, but it's a little bit more of a locker room question too. I mean, we mentioned the three guys that have come in recently: D'Angelo, Perunovich, Boqvist. This team has been together for so long, and these guys have been so tight. Obviously, we call them the uncles. There's a chance that Nelson is removed from there, which would be like a huge seismic change to that locker room. But how have those guys integrated so far in what you've seen? I mean, it's got to be weird to kind of enter any lot. I mean, listen, you get traded, you get picked up on waivers, you sign a contract, you're the new guy walking in. It's going to be weird. But like this team, very rarely do you go onto a team where these dudes have been together for like 10 or 12 years. And it's like they know each other inside and out. Their kids only know, these guys. And it's been such a long time that has there been any, I shouldn't say that, like, has the transition been smooth for these guys? Is it still kind of like a learning period for them? Or does it seem like they know that this might be temporary and they're just kind of like trying to get their skates back on the ice before they maybe, find a new home at some point else?
Yeah. I mean, I think Boqvist has been, he's better traveled of the two younger guys, and
right.
Perunovich, it never really, only one place, was never really able to crack that lineup. Those are guys that are just trying to find their way in the NHL, even though they're not kids anymore. Whatever, Boqvist 24, 25, Perunovich 25, 26. D'Angelo is obviously the one that's got the biggest personality, has had plenty of issues in different places he's been, and he's really the only one that I talk to at any length. And he's a guy who knows the game and knows the league, as he said to me. Like, he's been around so many different organizations and so many different teams that he probably knows at least a couple of guys anywhere he could have gone, even to Russia. And he is on his last chance. He didn't even think that there was going to be a last chance. When he left Russia, under whatever circumstances he left, really only a month ago, I think he thought he was going to hang out in South Jersey with his family, and then maybe see if someone wanted to bring him in. And it coincided with more Islander injuries. And I think what he said, the best part of what he said was like, he's played the Islanders when he was in Carolina in the playoffs, and obviously in the same division, and Rangers same division rivalry. So he's seen these guys a lot, and he's kind of wondered from the outside, like, why weren't they better? Like, they had a couple of years of good runs, but it's like it's a good group of guys, and now that he's in there, he's like, they believe in each other, and they've been here a long time, and there's a reason they've been here a long time, and that's great. I think when you're from the outside, you're kind of like, I think it's everybody's experience, whether you're a fan or whether you're a player. From the outside, you're like, Islanders, like, what a bunch of dopes. And then you're there and you're like, oh, like, good group, character guys. They care about each other. The boss cares about them. It's a great place. Suddenly my eyes are open. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to win, but I think for a guy like D'Angelo, who, can talk his way into and out of a lot of situations with his teammates, with opponents, with whomever, fans, I think the comfort part is important. And, for a guy who, even if he talks so tough, I think he understands that it's a way that, he can get into trouble very easily if the room is a little bit too loose, or if he's, got some beef with some people. I think, people talk about whether the Islanders, is everyone too comfortable because they have long-term contracts or this and that. I think the only thing that you can ever say, this goes back a few years, is that they like each other too much. There's not someone to come in and cause friction at the center of it. And Tony is a guy who can cause friction, certainly did with the Rangers at times, with particularly with Alexander Georgiev. But I think it's a combination of a guy who knows there's not going to be many more opportunities if this one goes by the boards. He's playing for a team that doesn't allow its players to freely express themselves on social media, shall we say, during the season, which is another place that Tony makes a lot of enemies. And I think the room polices itself pretty well. You've got a guy who's a captain who's as high character as they come in the league in Anders Lee, and a bunch of guys who they're dudes, they're hockey players, they like to have a good time, but I think they don't really want anybody to step out of line because it's the way that Lou wants it, and I think it's the way that they're used to having it. So it didn't surprise me too much that D'Angelo stepped in and actually played well there. I mean, I think you can't just come off the street essentially and play 27 minutes a night for 2 weeks straight and expect it to go great. But I think if Pulock is back and Dobson is back and they get through the deadline, I think Tony's probably a pretty good option to be your 5-6 guy. And if they kept him around as their number 7 for next year, that wouldn't surprise me a whole lot either, but we'll see. Things could look very different, once next season rolls around. But
I'm not ready to have that conversation yet, but I do appreciate that you brought it up because that thought had crossed my mind too. And I'm like, nah, I'm not ready for this yet, but no, that's cool. Yeah. Again, like I thought about that. Like, I mean, guys coming into rooms is kind of a weird thing all the time, but coming into this room has got to be like, I don't know if intimidating is the right word, but it almost has to feel like you're, all of a sudden walking into a clubhouse. Like, I know it's a loaded word, especially for the Islanders, but like you're walking into a clubhouse where just everybody knows each other, and like it's got to be a weird feeling. But no, it's good to know that is more of a help, I think, than a hindrance. Like it's not like a cliquey thing. Like you're now part of us, whatever. You go sit over there in your corner and be done with you. But they're tight, but they're not unwilling to bring new people in.
Yeah, I mean it's a good atmosphere. It's definitely I think a little different with Clutterbuck not there. He was kind of the big personality, but I think it's still a very solid room, and that can be good and bad. But we'll see where it's at when the next few months.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if they start trading dudes, and things get a lot worse. Art, this has been terrific. Thank you again so much. I'm going to put links to all the articles we discussed here in the post at Lighthouse Hockey and on the Patreon as well. But it's what I think and what I know about the New York Islanders of the Four Nations break, which came out on the 6th. Brock Nelson. There was there's the articles about Brock Nelson's quotes. I think we talked about already. Long Island Made, how the Islanders shaped James Hagens, is the second one. And then the Cole Eiserman one that we mentioned briefly was Islanders prospect Cole Eiserman scores big goals wherever he goes. He's got a gift. He does. It's showmanship, which most Islanders don't have. And then we'll be on the lookout for the next one you got coming up. What are you looking forward to with one final week here during the Four Nations break? Are you going to watch at least the finale? I was going to have us record an episode of Weird Islanders that day, but now I feel like everybody's just going to be watching that game instead.
I think it depends. I think the most U.S. thing that the Americans could do is, I know they don't have any extra players really, so you can't just sit everybody, but they tanked a little bit against Finland to knock Canada out of the gold medal game.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah,
that would be the greatest international hockey incident of all time, and I would frankly respect it. I think it would carry a lot of bad blood into the back half of the season. So that would be fascinating. I don't think it would happen, but pretty cool to see.
Yeah, the chance of comedy would be very, very high there.
That's what we're always looking for.
Right. Exactly.
Oh God, I hope so. The disgrace of Guion and turns into the disgrace of Boston. Yeah. I keep forgetting that there's more games before the final.
Yeah.
So yeah. I like to think that I'll probably have an eye on it, I guess, but it's gonna be annoying no matter what. The booing, the goaltending controversy in Canada, Sidney Crosby.
Oh my God.
It's just too much.
It's not a controversy. Binnington sucks. So that's not much of a controversy. He just stinks. He just keeps getting played. So it's unfortunate. But it's a couple more games to go. And then the finale is on Thursday. Okay, we're going to wrap it up here. Art, thanks again. We really appreciate you coming on with us again. Maybe we'll talk to you at the end of the season when all of this uncertainty shakes out and we've all got a better handle on how things are going to go. But until then, enjoy the rest of the season. Good luck covering both teams as well as you do. And we'll be on the lookout for whatever you got for us.
You got it, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Art. Become a member at patreon.com/Islanders Anxiety for ad-free episodes. Find us everywhere podcasts are. You know where to find us. Leave us a review where you can. Our theme song is Morning Haze by Family Dinner. Looking for more of their music on Spotify and their new record, God Looks Out for Fools. Read Lighthouse Hockey every single day. We're part of the Fans First Sports Network. Shop VintageIceHockey.com. Try Wines from the Pinot Project. Mike, where can everybody find you on Twitter?
The Big Lebowski with 2 E's.
Follow Mike at the Big Lebowski. Any final thoughts on the myriad of topics we have covered here today and have been illuminated for us by our good friend Arthur Staple?
No, not too much. The Brock Nelson situation looms, but I'm trying to not think about it as much as I can. It's not working, but I grant myself some levity by thinking that there does seem to be some momentum behind the fact behind the chance that Mikko Rantanen is traded from the Carolina Hurricanes at some point, and I'm just hoping that happens, even if to like kind of balance the scale, so we can all talk about what a genius Eric Tulsky is for recognizing his mistake. Not all GMs would do that.
Right.
Preach.
That would be amazing. Maybe he gets traded to. See, here's the problem: if Rantanen gets traded, hopefully it's not to a team that is going to torture the Islanders at any point anytime soon.
He's already on one. He's already on one. Though.
He's already on one. That's true, but hopefully not another one. But we'll see how that goes. All right. Thank you all very much for listening. We hope you enjoy your day off. Islanders are off again this week, and they start again on Sunday. Our next episode will be recorded on Monday because they're playing Dallas Sunday night. So we're going to record next Monday. The episode will come out on Tuesday. All right. Thanks a lot for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.